What if I told you that one post from President Donald J. Trump was all it took to make Canada blink, abandon a China deal, and quietly retreat from a globalist stage?
If Governor Carney thinks he's going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it. Threatening then, if Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA.
Because this is exactly what just happened. This was not some backroom negotiation. This wasn't months and months of diplomacy. This was a moment, guys. This was a line drawn in the sand when Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, decided to flirt with China, shake hands with Xi Jinping, and then lecture the world from the Davos stage about a new world order, and Trump shut it down instantly.
Carney came out of that meeting with China last week with a preliminary deal to lower tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles coming into Canada in return for lower tariffs on canola products for China. And here's what Trump initially said when he was asked for reaction to that deal.
Canada and China have just signed trade deals between the two partners.
Well, that's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
Now, here's why this matters to you. You're paying more for everything. Your job depends on industries being protected. Your country's leverage depends on strength, not speeches at the World Economic Forum. And while politicians love to talk about cooperation, Trump plays it in reality, guys, where trade, power, and survival, they don't care about your feelings. Now, Canada, they tried to play both sides, America and China. They thought that they could just keep the U.S. market access, slash tariffs for Chinese electric vehicles, and posture as a middle power. Well, they got that wrong. Now, one Truth Social post later, 100% tariffs were on the table. Canada's economy was exposed, and all of a sudden, the whole bravado thing that Mark Carney was pushing vanished. The China deal walked it back. The tough talk gone. The posture collapsed. Well, guys, tonight I'm going to walk you through the exact moment when President Trump made Canada blink, why Davos did not see it coming, and how this wasn't negotiation. This was power reasserted. Stick with me, guys, because this is way bigger than Canada. Drop a like for the video and subscribe. Okay, this didn't start with a speech. It started with paperwork. Mark Carney quietly approved this dramatic reduction in Canadian tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, slashing them from punitive levels down to a fraction of what had existed just a few months earlier. Now, this wasn't a tweak. This was a structural shift. I mean, those tariffs had been the barrier preventing Chinese state-backed EVs from flooding North America through Canada. Once lowered, the gate wasn't cracked. It was blown wide open. Now, this wasn't symbolic or exploratory. This was operational. It completely altered supply chain math immediately. Chinese manufacturers, they could now ship finished vehicles into Canada at scale, knowing that Canada's market is fully integrated with the United States under USMCA. And of course, the timing mattered. I mean, look, this happened while Canada sends roughly 3/4 of its exports south of the border at a moment when U.S. trade enforcement under President Trump had become aggressive again. Now, Canada didn't just pivot toward China. It did so while standing on U.S. economic ground. Chinese electric vehicles aren't normal consumer goods. They are state-subsidized industrial exports. They're being backed by Beijing to gain market share, destroy competitors, and lock in long-term dependency. This is why the tariff wall existed in the first place. North American auto manufacturing does not stop at borders. Components, subassemblies, and finished vehicles cross between Canada and the United States multiple times before ultimately reaching consumers. So by lowering these EV tariffs, Canada effectively positioned itself as a transit point. Chinese vehicles could enter Canada cheaply, undergo minimal processing, and then move their way into the U.S. supply chain ecosystem. This was the vulnerability. USMCA was never designed to absorb a flood of subsidized Chinese manufacturing disguised as North American trade. So, from Washington, D.C.'s perspective, this wasn't trade diversification. This was clearly a breach. It created a direct channel for China to bypass U.S. protections without ever even confronting American tariffs head on. This is why this crossed from economics into strategy. And this is where a lot of people who are watching the show right now, they recognize the pattern, because this is not just governments that do this. A viewer once said something that really stuck with me. She said, I feel like they just took advantage of me, not because she ignored her Medicare plan, not because she made a bad decision, but because the system just quietly just kept charging her for coverage she didn't even need year after year. No alerts, no warnings, just money leaking out in the background. This is exactly why I partner with Chapter. Chapter restores fairness by reviewing your Medicare coverage side by side with better options, so you can actually see what you're paying for and what you shouldn't be paying for. There's no pressure, there's no sales games or any of that backroom conversation talk, just clarity. Now, most people who've already checked are dialing the phone number at the bottom of your screen, 909-563-8279. They're calling right now, or they're clicking the link in the description down below this video to go to askchapter.org/Ron right now. Because once you realize something isn't working against you by accident, you stop ignoring it. Now, before Trump ever even posted, the warning was already out there, and it came from U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Speaking very publicly, Scott Bessent, he made it clear that Canada was picking a fight at exactly the wrong moment. The context mattered. USMCA negotiations, or I should say renegotiations, they were approaching, and Washington, D.C. was already reassessing trade enforcement across the board. Now, Bessent's message wasn't emotional, it was procedural. Don't escalate. Don't test the limits. Don't introduce new vulnerabilities while the framework itself is still under review.
Some industry-specific tariffs on Chinese goods, and we have a highly integrated market with Canada, sometimes in autos, which he dropped the EV tariff, I believe, from 100% to 6%. The goods can cross the border during the manufacturing process 6 times, and we can't let Canada become an opening that the Chinese pour their cheap goods into the U.S. We have a USMCA agreement, but based on that, which is going to be renegotiated this summer, and I'm not sure what Prime Minister Carney is doing here, other than trying to virtue signal to his globalist friends at Davos. I don't think he's doing the best job for the Canadian people.
It was a warning. Now, what made the warning sharper was the implication. Canada wasn't stabilizing the trade relationship. It was actively altering it in a way that disadvantaged the United States. That was a really stupid move, Mark Carney. That was a rather critical distinction. Now, from Washington's point of view, this wasn't a misunderstanding to be ironed out later. No, this was a deliberate move that forced a response. The signal was simple. Tolerance was already thinning, and Canada was walking straight into it. So instead of de-escalating from the warning, Mark Carney, he did the exact opposite. Apparently, he went to Davos, standing at the World Economic Forum just days after finalizing the China trade shift, and Mark Carney framed the moment as a transition into a new order. Now, he spoke about the decline of the old liberal system and ultimately elevated the role of middle powers. This is language that landed very differently in Washington, D.C. than it did in that room. Now, the venue mattered. Davos is not neutral ground. This is where economic alignment, not national sovereignty, is the organizing principle. So by delivering that message there, Carney essentially reframed Canada's posture from quiet trade adjustment to ideological signaling. Now, it wasn't just about EV tariffs anymore at that point. It looked like Canada was positioning itself right alongside global coordination structures that openly criticized U.S. economic power. Now, that speech, it didn't calm tensions. It validated every concern Washington already had. So in Washington, Davos isn't seen as a conference. It is actually seen as more of a coordination hub. So the World Economic Forum represents a style of global governance that prioritizes alignment among elites over national decision-making. Now, this is why rhetoric delivered there carries consequences the exact same words in a bilateral meeting never would. President Trump has been explicit about this for years. Davos doesn't negotiate with voters, it negotiates with systems. So, when Mark Carney used that stage to criticize how the United States uses trade leverage, it wasn't interpreted as commentary. This was read as positioning. Now, from Trump's perspective, Davos speeches are not academic. They're signals about who's aligning with whom and who's actually challenging American leverage under the banner of cooperation. This is why the speech landed as being adversarial. It suggested that Canada wasn't just adjusting policy, it was validating an alternative power structure that sees the United States dominance as a problem to be managed. Now, what you just watched happen between countries, this is the exact same trap that millions of families are stuck in personally right now. Think about your mortgage, right? 30 years, month after month, a payment that's so big that it just quietly dictates your life, where you work, where you travel, and what risks you can take and what risks you can't take. And that's leverage working against you. Now, most people, they just accept it because that's what they're told to be normal. Oh, you got a big mortgage payment. Oh, that's normal. That's just being an American, right? Just like Canada was told that global alignment was the price of access. But once you understand leverage, you realize something rather uncomfortable. Long-term debt isn't neutral. It's control. Now, here's the part most people never hear about. You don't need a massive income jump or some risky scheme to break free of it. Now, I teach a very simple 4-step framework that shows how people are collapsing their 30-year mortgages into just a few years and paying off their mortgages way earlier by changing how money moves, not how hard they work. No gimmicks, no refinancing tricks, just math, sequencing, and discipline. Now, if you're tired of that payment hanging over you, make sure to click the link down below and learn how this thing works. Once you see it, you will never look at your mortgage the same way again. Now, President Trump, he didn't respond through diplomats. He didn't send envoys. He went straight to Truth Social. Language was immediate and unmistakable. Governor Carney, that wasn't a slip. It was deliberate. Titles matter in power politics, and President Trump just stripped away one publicly. Then came the substance. A 100% tariff threat on all Canadian goods entering the United States.
Has never expressed to the world that they have the best deal, the second best deal in the world. The best deal in the world is Mexico, because remember, they have USMCA, which means 85% of the Canadian economy comes into the United States for zero. And there he is complaining that he's going to go to China and improve it. What's he going to do? China's delighted to sell to him, but do you think China's going to open their economy to accept exports from Canada?
Now, that single post changed the entire equation. I mean, he essentially reframed this dispute from debate to consequence. There was no room for ambiguity. There was no phased response, no conditional phrasing. The message was binary. If Canada became a conduit for China, access to the U.S. market would disappear instantly. Now, what made it so effective was the speed. Markets, ministries, and even manufacturers all received the signal at the exact same time. In one move, Trump collapsed the timeline and forced Canada to confront reality without delay. Now, once this tariff threat landed, the numbers did the talking. Canada sent roughly 75% of its exports to the United States. Every single day, about $3.3 billion in goods and services cross that border. Now, the relationship's not symmetrical. The United States sends only a small fraction of its exports north. Now, that imbalance matters when leverage is applied. A 100% tariff on Canadian goods wouldn't have been a negotiating inconvenience. It would have been an economic shock. Entire sectors from autos to agriculture, they would have been hit instantly. Ottawa didn't have a realistic countermeasure. Retaliation would have hurt Canada more than it would hurt Washington, so that wasn't even an option for them. There was no alternate market that could absorb that volume quickly, and there's no political appetite for escalation. So once the math was laid out internally, the decision space narrowed fast. This wasn't about pride, it was about survival. Calling Mark Carney governor wasn't about mockery, it was about hierarchy. In international politics, titles signal standing. So by reframing Mark Carney's role, President Trump was communicating something broader. Canada does not operate as an independent power center, especially when it comes to trade, access, and security. It operates within a U.S. anchored system. Now, that message there wasn't just for Ottawa. It was for every allied government that was watching closely. The distinction between insult and enforcement matters here. Insults fade. Enforcement reshapes behavior. Trump wasn't questioning Canada's sovereignty in theory. He was defining its limits in practice. Now, that demotion that President Trump issued, it straight up clarified who sets the boundaries and who must operate within them. Now, for allies accustomed to symbolic disagreement without consequence, this was different. It showed that rhetoric, venue, and alignment now carries immediate costs, not abstract criticism. Now, within days, the tone out of Ottawa changed completely. Mark Carney and his government moved into damage control mode, issuing clarifications that hadn't existed before. The China deal, they said, was never meant to be a full free trade agreement. It would be consistent with USMCA obligations. Now, Canada, they insisted, had no intention of becoming a backdoor for Chinese goods, or so they say. Now, that explanation mattered less than the timing. Just days earlier, Mark Carney was speaking confidently in Davos, Switzerland about new orders and middle powers. Now the language was cautious, legalistic, and defensive. So what changed wasn't the policy on paper. It was the cost of maintaining it. President Trump's tariff threat forced a recalculation and the bravado evaporated. The contrast was stark. Global posturing abroad followed by careful reassurance at home. The retreat wasn't subtle. It was measurable, it was public, everybody saw it, and it was rather fast. So what really makes this moment unusual is what didn't happen. There was no counteroffer from Washington, no phased compromise, no list of concessions that Canada could make to soften the response. No. President Trump didn't ask for changes. He just imposed a boundary. That's the difference between negotiation and enforcement. You don't get a say, Canada. Pardon my Canadian brothers and sisters out there. It sucks that your leadership just sucks. In a negotiation, both sides trade leverage, but here only one side had it. The United States didn't need Canada to agree. It needed Canada to comply. And once the 100% tariff threat was issued, the outcome became binary. Either Canada abandoned the China pathway or it lost access to its primary export market. There really was no middle ground to bargain over. And this is why this ended so quickly. Trump wasn't trying to extract value. He was closing a door and waiting to see who stepped back. So what this episode revealed is a doctrine that's been quietly reasserted under President Donald J. Trump. The United States will not tolerate external competitors operating inside of its economic hemisphere, period. I mean, China wasn't just a trade partner in this story. It was the trigger. The moment that Canada positioned itself as a channel for Chinese industrial expansion, the response became inevitable. Canada's role matters here. It's not a peer competitor to the United States. It is a dependent ally whose prosperity is structurally tied to U.S. markets, security guarantees, and logistics, period. That doesn't eliminate sovereignty, but it defines boundaries. Now, this doctrine isn't new historically, but it's newly enforced. The Western Hemisphere is treated as a strategic space, not an open marketplace for rival powers. And when that boundary is tested, the response isn't rhetorical. It's immediate, asymmetric, and decisive. Canada learned where that line was by crossing it. Now, the consequences of this moment, it extends way beyond Ottawa. Every U.S. ally engaging China took notice. The lesson wasn't about tariffs, it was about leverage. Globalist signaling without economic independence now carries real cost. Speaking confidently at forums like Davos doesn't protect access to U.S. markets if policy choices undermine American interests. So, this marked a massive shift from tolerance to enforcement. Now, for years, allies just assumed that they could just balance Washington rhetorically while hedging economically. Those days are long gone. That assumption collapsed right here. Expectations were reset. Alignment is no longer implied. It's tested. And when those tests fail, consequences follow quickly. Canada's retreat wasn't about embarrassment. It was about reality. Power structures don't dissolve because someone declares a new order. They change when leverage changes. Now, in this case, it didn't. And that's the signal the rest of the world just received. Drop a like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.